Hey, this is Scott Danbom, and you're watching Time to Connect.
Mr. Scott Danbom. How are you doing, man? Thanks for taking the time to connect.
I'm good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I appreciate you joining me here. What have you been up to now? What are you working on these days?
Uh, I'm trying to wake up and face the world. uh, I, I'm just cracking at stuff here and there. I'm doing some stuff with Alejandro Escovedo coming up.
Right on.
Uh, I got some Centro-matic shows, which is kind of fun. Uh, June and yeah, stuff like that. Just
Yeah,
always trying.
cool. Yeah, I definitely want to talk about some of that stuff. Am I right that you just had a birthday, didn't you?
Last week.
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
and and you finally turned 30. That's good. That's good. Do you talk about your age? Is that something that you care about one way or another?
No, I don't care.
Divulging. How old are you?
I'm the youngest in Centromatic, so I'm not 50 yet.
Yeah.
I just turned 49.
Well,
So
congratulations, man. One more
thanks.
year in your 40s. That's great.
Yeah, this is it.
Speaking of Centromatic, might as well just go ahead and jump into that topic. I'm just curious how you're thinking about Centromatic. I think last time you and I talked, it was actually by Zoom on a different project of mine, and we were talking about the possibility then of Centromatic playing some more shows.
Hmm.
Now it's happening, and just what how do you think of Centromatic now? Is it just it's alive again? It never was dead. We're just doing some shows. How do you think of it?
I mean, it's always been fairly democratic. I mean, this is Will's idea initially, so I mean, it's really what Will wants to think in some ways, but he's always, I don't know. I mean, when the band ended, or when it stopped, my vote was always to say like, hey, if we need to take a break, let's just take a break. It could be a year, 5 years, 10 years, could be forever. But I was always like, I don't really like, maybe as far as just getting the I don't know, people's attention. It was kind of not a bad idea to just say we're kind of done for a little bit. But I don't know. I mean, we could just play some more shows and that's it, or we could maybe make a record. I don't know. But I feel like it's at least it was fun when we did it with Jason's Shoals thing. So it seemed fun. So we were like, I think after that we announced that we would do some more shows, and then they got pushed back a little bit.
Yeah, well, man, excited about that. And I hate that I missed the recent thing you did with Will at Dan's, where you played a grand piano. Is that right? What was the
Yeah,
story on that show?
it's a cool, so Jimmy Webb, the guy who wrote like Galveston and
Yeah.
Wichita Lineman stuff. Dan got him to play. I don't know the first time he did, maybe like 10 years ago. But so he's played like, I think at least 3 times at Dan's. But every time he's played, Dan had to rent a grand piano. So he's kind of figured out that he could kind of have a weekend of sort of piano centric
Yeah.
because he already has the piano, right?
Right.
And and so yeah, he asked me to do the Sunday after he played, and I was like, oh boy, okay. And then I just, of course, was like, well, how do I get people there? I'll ask Will if he's doing something. and and Will just happened to be coming off tour with John Moreland, and
Hmm.
so it just worked out perfect, and it was really fun. It was
Yeah.
cool. So
Right on. Dan's is kind of a home, I guess, there in Denton, isn't it? It's become that.
I mean, I work there, so it is like my home.
Yeah.
I've worked there for years, and it's, yeah, it's like it's a home to a lot of a lot of people. It's become one of those clubs, you know, where it's about to turn 20.
Wow.
And so, you know, having a club that size kind of maintain is one thing, but so, you know, it's been a kind of revolving door of what I do consistently, but it's just nice to have a place like that.
Yeah.
We just not only feel relaxed, but just to have friends come and play it, and it's a great place, and lucky to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just one of those, it's become one of those institutions in Denton, like recycled books, you know. It's just one of those places that you need to stay grateful that we have it, because if you didn't have it, it would sorely be missed, that's for sure. Well, maybe we can do a little bit of biographical stuff. I don't want to spend too much time there. I know you grew up in a small town in Oklahoma, but maybe talk just a little bit about, you know, how you got to Denton, why you got to Denton, what town you grew up in, that kind of thing. By the way, I'll tell you, I asked Will and Mark and Matt, what should I ask Scott about? And Matt said, ask him what the 5-day forecast is, because he's a walking weather forecast. And Will said, ask him why he loves sweet tea so much.
Oh boy, he's trying to rib me.
Yeah.
Only a few things Will and I kind of disagree on. One of them's tea, maybe.
Okay.
I don't hate sweet tea. But I don't think you need to add sugar. Also, there's no such thing as unsweet teas. That makes sense. Like there's sweet tea, and then there's tea. It's not unsweet. That, you know, Chick-fil-A doesn't get to market that, or whoever started that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the 5-day forecast, sure, like it's again, I have the windows open, and it's, you know, and then it's going to warm up for a few days, and it's that kind of magical time of year where it gets like almost 90, and then it cools back down to like, you know, 40s at night.
Yeah. Are you seriously somebody who really is kind of stays connected to the weather forecast?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Weather Channel was something I always watched. It's shifted a little bit. The Weather Channel has been sort of bought and sold, but yeah, I mean, the weather has always been fascinating.
Any idea why? Have you ever
Maybe a science connection or something, but
yeah.
I don't know. I think it's powerful. It's I don't really know exactly. It's also something you can relate to anybody about, right? You can always talk about the weather, but
that's true. Yeah, and you grew up in Oklahoma, where there's a lot of interesting weather for sure. I mean, everything from tornadoes to snowstorms to heat, right? What town did you grow up in Oklahoma?
So yeah, the quick is I was born in Connecticut, but my family is all from Texas. But my dad taught at OU after, like, you know, when I was 4 or 5, and so we're in Norman for a little bit, and then my dad worked for Conoco, which there was a big R&D facility in Ponca City, Oklahoma, and so second grade till I graduated, that's where I lived. And pretty small town. It's like, I don't know, 30,000 people, about 80 miles south of Wichita, about 80 miles north of Oklahoma City, and about, you know, it's kind of in this weird dead zone of I mean, Tulsa is actually closer than all those other. Yeah. So I'd go see shows and stuff in Tulsa. I mean, I'd see some stuff in Oklahoma City, and I mean, my sister went to, you know, Columbia to go to school, Columbia, Missouri, and so I guess there's a lot of Midwest kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of fun to talk to, well, Jason Isbell just like was in the movie, the Scorsese film that they recorded, or that they shot up there in Pawhuska, which is really close to Ponca City,
Mm-hmm.
Bartlesville. It's like this
Right.
Osage. I don't know if you know that book, but it's what is it? It's the title of the movie, The Blood Flowers Moon, whatever. It's about the start of the FBI and like how this one tribe had all these oil rights, and they basically started killing them off to try to, and like the sheriffs weren't doing anything about it, so the FBI got involved. And but that whole area up there is like all these old, some old, similar to like East Texas, Houston. There was a huge amount of oil discovered in that area. So there's like that Bartlesville, Ponca City, like Phillips 66, all that whole scene. It was just weird. So yeah, that's where I grew up. So it seemed like Nowheresville, and it kind of was, but it was also like there was, a lot of pretty smart people living in a small area, and so I felt like my education, kind of benefited from that, from having, a good amount of arts. We were always up there with the best of Tulsa or Norman or anything. So that was kind of an interesting, take on growing up in small town Oklahoma. And it was kind of, idyllic in some ways. I mean, I knew that it was a bubble, but and then when I decided to go to school, I picked a music school.
Yeah. So as a kid, is one of the reasons you got into music was because you were in a town with maybe not as much to do if you were in a bigger city? Is that it was sort of out of boredom of finding something to do, or have you always been drawn to music, or a little of both?
I mean, that's possible. I mean, I was always drawn to music. I've definitely, I think I always wanted to listen to music. My dad was kind of, he's a drummer. He's a scientist, but he also played drums when he was a kid. And so he didn't get a kid again until I was more junior high. But we would always have music on, and then they bought a piano, probably when I was like 5 or 4, and I was too young to take lessons, and I was kind of mad about that, or the group lessons that my sister was involved in. So they were sweet, and they got me private lessons, where I could do it, and that started it.
And I've heard you talk about that a little bit in a different interview, and I know you won a lot of competitions. You were, I don't know if you're comfortable with the word prodigy, but you were certainly certainly a natural at piano as a kid. And so fast forward, well, let me just back up for a second and ask you, what were you listening to as a kid? What kind of music? I love to hear what people, especially when they're little kids, maybe 7 to 10 in that range. What kind of music do you remember listening to then?
I mean, early on, my dad had the standard, they had a lot of records, and it wasn't like they had a lot of classical records or stuff like that. Not like they didn't. They had a lot of Beatles records, Beach Boys records. My dad was like a Dylan nerd probably when he was early college, and he had all the Dylan records. I remember listening to, what was kind of cool at the time, like that Jerry Rafferty record, City to City, Supertramp record.
Yeah.
I mean, there was like all sorts of kind of contemporary music. flown around, but if, and then when they start, training in like classical, you listen a little bit more of it just because you do. And then, I probably started to listen to more alternative sort of music, when I started junior high. I had a
Okay.
couple friends that were, they're like, wow, there's all this other stuff out there. I
Yeah.
was like, oh, there really is. And
Yeah.
and then that just opened up the whole thing. And so some of that was way contemporary, and some of it was Sign of the Times. And so, I mean, I felt like, again, like, this could be another discussion, but you had to listen to what was either on the radio, what was on television. You could sort of seek out things, but you had to either have to buy it, or you could go to the library, or your friend had it. And if you didn't have those resources, you couldn't hear it.
Yeah.
And that's the difference now, is that you can listen to almost anything at any given point, as long as you have internet or whatever, you have. So
yeah. And that's a beautiful thing, and I would never complain about that, really. But there's so much lost there. The process of discovering something back then was a lot more special, because it was a lot harder to find it. And when you did discover something new, it seemed to me it was a deeper experience. I hate to sound like the old guy talking about back in my day,
oh yeah, but it has to be discussed.
But it's true. It's true that there's depth that is lost when you have the breadth that we have now and the ease of it. And I wouldn't trade it. I think it's fantastic, but it's also important, I think, to recognize something is lost there. Do you have was there a record or a show that you went to, any kind of moment where you were listening to a record or going to a show where you said, man, this is what I want to do? Is there any particular moment there?
Oh, for sure. There were a lot of moments, where I just kind of wanted to see what that life was like. I remember I'd gotten into the Pixies, and that was that was around the time of Doolittle. So they were just ready to just kind of blow up in that alternative sense, I guess. But my sister was going to school in Missouri, and I went and saw the Pixies on the Doolittle tour. And I had a fake ID, and got in.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, this is it.
Yeah.
I think, and that same weekend, was like, that was a pretty infamous club, or like it's changed venues now, but at that what's that place called? Anyways, it's in Columbia, Missouri, and it used to be a small, like 200, 300, maybe 400 tops, kind of maybe like the size of Rick's place in Denton at the time. Now it's like a theater, Blue Note. And in other shows, I went to some shows at Kane's, ballroom in Tulsa, before I think they closed it down in the late 90s, and then they reopened it, and that's a super fabulous place to see shows. Yeah, I think there was a couple of, of course, like just the cool factor, but just, there was some kind of intimate about all of it that I was like, what, how does this work? How does this happen? And it just seemed kind of the sign of the time. I don't know. It felt kind of monument, like, oh, well, that would be really fun to try to do something like that.
Was there ever a time when you almost had to make a choice? Was there a possibility of you having a career as a classical pianist or
I don't think
jazz?
so.
No. No.
I mean,
Well, how about?
I guess I could have tried a little harder at one of those things if I mean, I think I mean, again, if I would have pressed on, I mean, harder maybe at some of the classical, and I never was a natural jazz player. Like, it was fun learning the language, and it was, I mean, going into Denton was very, as an 18-year-old, is very intimidating.
Yeah. Yeah.
It,
What drew you to? I mean, I know it's a great music school, but you weren't a jazz player, and I tend to think, you know, I started in Denton in '74, and so people like Lyle Mays were there already. The 1 o'clock lab band was getting Grammy nominations, and so it was really on the map as a jazz school. And I'm always intrigued by people who would choose Denton for music if they weren't necessarily a jazz player. And so how did that work for you?
I mean, I think it was like, you know, it was just the same sort of coordinated things with, you know, when your folks are like, well, why don't you go study music? You know, you're great at music. You know, this is the best music program in the South. Like, you know, they have a, you know, if you want to do like something rock, you know, might as well do something jazz or something, you know, and I think they were just thinking of it as practical, and whereas it's
not
really
as expensive as Berkeley, maybe.
Yeah, Berkeley. There was some others, you know, I guess there's that school in Florida that's like another kind of big music school at the time. I mean, there are the great, obviously great musical school, like there's tons of just great classical programs, but I mean, Denton is definitely unique in that way, in that fact that they do draw in kids from all over.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you have it in the backyard of a huge metroplex. Yeah, I mean, but at the time, like that was still kind of the idea of kind of DIY, you know, do it yourself. You know, there was this whole idea that was kind of going down, and
it was happening in Denton for sure.
It was happening, and what hadn't gotten the recognition necessarily, besides the fact of like there was this weird jazz school there.
Right. Was it 1990 when you got there?
I got there in 91, so I was a little behind the other guys.
And pretty quickly after you got there, you started playing out. Adams Farm was one of your first bands, is that right?
I wasn't in Adams Farm. That was Mark and Matt, but I was in a band a little bit for I was in another art band that was the only band that we were all kind of had done little things in, was a band called Dooms UK. I played in like played in like a folk rock band for like a few years. That was kind of like Sundays, kind of 10,000 Maniacs called at first we were called Marmalade, and then there was a 60s band called Marmalade, so we'd switched band names a bunch. But and you know, that was the first time I was getting shows in Dallas and Fort Worth instead of just Denton. And then I saw Slobberbone play, and I was like, because there was a lot of punk rock going on and a lot of like funk bands, you know, and that was all fun. And there was just some really loud, you know, grunge, you know, guitar, and there was a lot of that going on, as you know. And then I saw, Slobber, and I was really getting into Neil Young at the time, and I was already way into, you know, Camper and stuff like that. And so I was like, whoa, there's a band in town doing this, you know. So I was a fan, so I would just go see them all, you know, whenever they would play any sort of like pool hall.
Where you saw them first time, by chance?
I think I saw them at this place called Jackson's, which was kind of related to this other venue, but they were more of like a pizza place that did like, you know, had pool and stuff. I don't know if that was on Hickory.
Was it the place? Because the first time I saw Slobberbone, I remember the show because someone I knew said, "Hey, this guy in one of my classes is a drummer in this band. Come out and see this band." And I went and saw him, and kind of like you, I was like, man, I mean, I dig, like, the whole Billy Goat and Tin Hands and all that stuff. That it's really cool. But something about Slobberbone just immediately said, "Oh man, this is something I'm digging." And it was at that place that I remember they advertised it, that they had the white pizza. You
I
remember
think
that?
I think that was Jackson's. I mean,
Yeah, across the street from Rip Rocks.
yeah, that's it.
Cool. We
That's
might have
it.
been at that same show.
I mean, maybe we were there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would go see them. Like they would play there like once a month. They would play. Then they started playing Jim's Diner, because bands were kind of started to play there. I'm sure they played the Main Event, and they were probably doing other stuff. I probably saw Brent play with Adams Farm a few times. But yeah, I remember just having conversations with Brent, just as a fan. I was like, just kind of curious, just kind of racking his brain and just, hanging out with him.
And you were actually ended up in the band for a while, didn't you?
Yeah. And so, I mean, like, then I was like, well, I mean, I haven't played violin in a while, but it'd be kind of fun to give it a shot. And then, I mean, I knew the potential of that band pretty quickly. I was like, this band, Brent's such a cool songwriter. This sort of Americana thing is just untapped, ready to go.
It was ready to go at that time, yeah.
And, Wilco and all that stuff was just like right there. And like, yeah, I mean, but besides all of the name dropping, it was just like, he had just a great style about him, and just it was just like, it was punk rock. It was do yourself. It was beautiful melodies. It was sweet. It was just kind of, it was just something I liked a lot. And, because of that, that's how I met, Will and everyone else. And I already kind of knew Matt and Mark, but because of that, really what it did kind of give me a little credit to yeah, because I mean, everyone was really starting to really dig Slobberbone, and as they should. And so, I met a lot of people because of that.
Yeah, those are great days in Denton. I was actually still there then. You mentioned Neil Young earlier, and a lot of that, I'm sure he's gotten his props for that, but he was a real pioneer in that sense, that he would just kick out the jams, rock and roll 1 minute, and have a sweet acoustic melody the next. And I think that he was one of the most important people to kind of show us that was a possibility in one band, and that really fed that whole alt country thing in the 90s in a big way. Was Neil somebody that was important to you when you were coming up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm immediately, I remember, hearing the hits, and then one of their shows in high school I went and saw was Sonic Youth opening up for Neil Young. That was a big deal. I mean, I already knew, I was like, I really like Neil Young. I think I was like, and then I just was like, this is it. Like this is it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, at the time, you could either go out and try to buy everything, try to find everything, and I would, so I remember just trying to get as much as I could, including like all the, the Buffalo Springfield stuff, and
this record here, if you can see where I'm pointing.
Oh, and the first one,
great record.
It doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion. Like
everyone
always talks about the next one, and that's kind of huge. It's great, but I think that first one was really all the cool like string arrangements on that record.
Yeah, I would think that one would, knowing the little bit I know about you, I would think that one would resonate with you. One of the things we got to talk about, and I don't want to keep you too long today, we've got to talk about Static Diary. And I sort of got obsessed with that record for a little while, and I want to ask you if you're gonna have plans to put out anything else. But one of my references there that I would, if I was telling somebody about that, not in every song, but sometimes you sound a little bit like Neil in terms of the vocals.
Oh yeah, I think that's, it, I feel like that was going to happen, to, and there was definitely a couple on there that like, I'm definitely phrasing probably my vocal like his.
Mhm.
It's just, I can't help the influence, I guess. And
Sure, nor should you. We all stand on the shoulders of giants, man. And
yeah, and so yeah, I don't, I definitely understand like why people say that, for sure.
mhm,
I
mhm.
feel like I've gotten to be where I'm more comfortable with my voice and doing just being my voice, but it's always going to have that sort of timbre. My voice just goes like that. So,
Well, let's go ahead and go to this record if you don't mind and talk about
Sure.
that a little bit. Like I said, I was sort of obsessed with it for a little while, and knowing I was going to talk to you today, I've been listening to it again, and it really holds up, man. It's a really beautiful record.
Thanks.
And I know that there's people have made the Granddaddy reference, and I think that makes sense. I don't know if anyone else has made this reference, but one of the bands that it reminds me of, some of the moments on that record remind me a lot of, is Sparkle Horse. Is that a band that you've listened to a lot?
Oh yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Sparkle Horse is, that the House and Gabriel thing was Sparkle Horse.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. I mean, Sparkle Horse is definitely just a huge, huge deal for me. I think he just probably one of the greatest things.
Yeah.
And and that's the whole Vic Chestnut thing again with Sparkle Horse and Vic and that. Yeah, I'm glad you think that, because that's sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Two people that we've sadly lost. Do you have any plans to make more records? I know I've heard you say that you were a little bit hesitant to make a record because you have played with, I mean, gosh, some of the people you played with is kind of a who's who, and you played with such brilliant songwriters. And if I'm not wrong, I think I've heard you say it was hard for you to go ahead and make a record of your own stuff because you had such high standards of people you play with. But man, it's a great record. It's a beautiful record. Do you have plans to make another one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, you try to put everything into an equation, unfortunately, whether it be financially or just like, it's to make a record, there's definitely money involved, there's definitely time involved, and
Yeah.
and you just want your heart to be in it,
Yeah.
and so I'm just so glad that I opened up some more puzzles to my musical world, and I feel more ready to kind of just explore more of that. So
Yeah. Cool.
yeah. So I think the short answer is yes. Soonish.
Okay. Right on. Who's playing on the record other than you?
So Will did drums on a couple songs, and he played guitar on a few songs, and he sang on it. And Rob Sanchez, I don't know if you know him. He Monaghan's. He played Sarah Jaffe for a long time. It's great, and Britt and Beisenhauer recorded it, and so he plays on it. Rob Sanchez plays drums on it. My friend Don Cento, who I met in Denton, he was playing with Sarah at the time, but it was just cool to reconnect with him. He played with a band called Chomsky back in the day, and he played guitar on it, and I think that's it. And Matt Pence mastered it.
Right on. Well, let's see. Man, I've got so many questions here, but I don't want to keep you too much longer. Let me just say, let me ask you this. This is a question Mark Hedman recommended that I ask you, and it's a really good question. Unlike Matt and Will, he didn't take the occasion to yank your chain a little bit. He gave me a really serious question, which was, he said, ask him to talk a little bit about how the different approaches to you're a sideman so much of the time to some really great people, from Alejandro to Will to Sarah Jaffe, Daniel Markham, I know you play with, and of course Patterson. How do you what are kind of different approaches you take when you're playing with someone in terms of kind of asserting yourself and honoring their vision, as opposed to saying, hey, I really think we should do this? And then how does that compare to making that static diary record where it was all you and you made all the decisions? How does that feel in terms of being a sideman? And it's one thing being in Centro-matic for how many years, and you probably felt a lot more free to assert yourself. Just what is that process like for you in terms of your approach to how you play on those different kind of projects?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. Good question, Mark. Nice work.
Thanks, Mark.
It really just depends on the music, but and I'll go back to another person I got to play with, who we lost to, was Jay Bennett from Wilco.
Yeah.
Who, he was probably, I don't know how much older he was, but he had a lot of good advice for all of that. And it was mostly what I already kind of knew. It's like, let the song be the song, or let the feeling be the feeling. Find a way to kind of match that feeling in any way that adds to it, makes the feeling kind of go in other places. But it's also like, you're up there, you have to take a risk to make that, it's this kind of give and pull. So you're not doing nothing.
Right.
You have to be reserved as much as you can, and then when you need to show why you're on stage, or whatever, or you're in a session or whatever, that's it's a hard balance. I think it's when I think of good musicians now, if I can judge them, if I can, but I always listen to that.
And is it more instinctive than it is an intellectual process?
I would hope so, but I think it's also like you have to think about it, and like, again, you have to be comfortable with listening to all of it, whether it be, I don't really love listening to live recordings that I do, but it's important, sometimes to really to get in there. And as much as Patterson loves the like fly by the seat of your pants sort of like rock and rollness,
yeah,
and that's true. They don't want to work something to death. They want it to feel like it's just going some cool place, which that's awesome. But at the same time, I think he really does listen to every sort of aspect of that, and like really kind of dives deep and go, okay, well, this works, this doesn't really work, but
yeah,
so there's I don't know, you're always adjusting. I don't know, it's definitely it's an evolving question, because you're constantly trying to get better at it.
Yeah. And that's something that connects to jazz, by the way. I think that that's what great jazz players do. You're listening, you're connected, you're always present for what's happening right now, as opposed to just bringing this prepackaged approach to it, right?
Yeah, you're always comping, you're always vibing, you're all like, I mean, seeing the jazz at the schools still blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some of the players I get to talk to just at the bar, and some of it's so heartfelt, like how they now hear what all the stuff that we were doing in the 90s and in the early 2000s. After I remember, like, there's this kid who's a drummer. He's like, I think he was a 1 o'clock guy. Like, he's just could play with any, he's just one of those guys. And he was kind of making it more, had an intention of listening to more kind of rock, and you know, he glommed on to Matt because he's one of the greatest. And and
Great
they
guy.
were talking about, like, I don't know, for some reason he started listening to, you know, he was really listening to Centromatic's House and Gabriel stuff. And he came over and made a point. He was just like, the music's so like emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, yeah,
It really is.
trying to get somewhere with it. And but you know, he was like, it really has affected me. And I was like, oh, I mean, he was vulnerable and telling me this. And, you know, he's like, and so like all those kind of players, you know, there's still this sort of give and take to listening to music, playing music. And yeah, I mean, I could go, I mean, it's cool. It's such a cool, interesting town, Denton, still, to just, you know, go and catch music sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. On Centromatic music being emotional, and South San Gabriel music as well. Brent Best told me a little anecdote about being at one of your shows, and he said 1 minute he was laughing his ass off. Will did something. He was over doing his dancing or doing something crazy. He said he was laughing so hard he was almost crying. And he said literally 5 minutes later he was genuinely crying from the emotion of a song that Will was doing. And so I think that's one of the, yeah, for me too, that's one of the attractions of Centromatic. It's very emotional music. It's hard to explain why, but I think all of you probably are channeling your heart in some way there that really made it such a beautiful thing. Well, hey man, I have to ask you about Bob Dylan, because
Okay.
it's a thing that I'm asking all my guests, because I'm sort of obsessed with Bob. So we can talk about Bob just a little bit, but then I'd like to, if I can, kind of finish up by some rapid fire type questions.
Okay, sure.
Fair enough. So
Yeah.
what about Bob? I know you mentioned your parents, your dad at least was into Dylan when you were a kid. What do you think about when you think about Bob? Has he been an influence on you directly, and certainly indirectly on all of us? But just how do you think about Bob?
Well, I mean, I just think it's just magic. I mean, it's weird that he's as popular as he is, but it's also kind of cool how it did work out. Yeah, you know, I think, I'm sure as somebody my dad's age who's seen him, you know, all through the different, I think after a while he maybe didn't connect with Dylan, and I was like, Dad, there's all like from not mid 90s on, Dylan is just maybe some of the best Dylan.
Mm-hmm.
And like Art Patterson calls it old man Dylan. But it's
Yeah.
so it's really inspiring. This how,
Yeah.
you know, you had this huge amount from, you know, mid 60s to, you know, I'm not even discounting the 80s stuff, but like that was just, you know, forever. And then you had the time out of mind all the way through, you know, to this like last couple of years, you know, it's
Right.
like it doesn't end. I've seen Dylan, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, and it's probably, you know, a couple of those times were good, fine, but a couple of those times were really, really good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you could just tell, or you know, maybe I was just feeling really good about it, but yeah, I mean, the guy, I also like some of the songwriters. I mean, some of the artists I love are just like, I'm a huge Robin Hitchcock nerd. I don't know if you know him very well, but
Sure, of course, yeah.
I think of him as like, I always say like he's my Dylan. Every generation has a Dylan. So like, you know, he does the sort of a lot of the Dylan things,
Yeah.
in those ways, but you know, he was the Sid Barrett Lennon Dylan mix that was just channeled in the 80s, that had, you know, and then became like the REM, you know, troubadour guy, you know, and
Yeah.
but prolific, and like he's just gotten better too. And it's pretty amazing. It's pretty incredible to see people to kind of have that ethic. I wish I was that kind of songwriter, but yeah, I mean, yeah, Dylan. I mean, and I'm with the band and like the all, you know, just how he kind of, I think how he kind of pushes bands, you know, like I always, like you see the Heartbreakers talk about it.
Mhm.
Like they said that was some of the hardest touring they've ever done. Also the most rewarding, you know, was like going out there and going, I don't know what he's gonna do,
Right.
you know, and I think that's a pretty cool energy, you know. It's not always, I'm sure it's not, you know, it's not always the most fun, but at least you have, like, that's something you can, I don't know, there's a process there that's kind of timeless. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and when it does hit, it's like people, you know, that's what it's all there for. That's what all the weird little things we're supposed to gather in the meantime. So I mean, yeah, I mean, he set a pretty big standard. And you know, between you know, all my favorite rock and roll, you know, it's not, I don't always listen to, you know, but yeah, the Byrds, Neil,
Mhm.
the band, I mean, all the stuff, all the kind of bands that were kind of jangly in the 80s,
Mhm.
and you know, all this, that's all related.
Yeah. Yeah. As my Mike Nicolai said when I had him on this series, he said that, you know, Dylan is just endlessly fascinating to think about and talk about, that all the phases he went through, the influence he's had, you know, that just the incredible output, the impact he had on culture. I mean, it's he's just one of those people, you know, he's one of those people. Well, man, let me hit you with some rapid fire questions if you don't mind.
Okay.
So how about this one? You get one record to listen to for the rest of your life, and that's it.
One record. Oh, okay. Could I narrow it down to like five and like different, like or
Well,
just
you can
one?
mention a couple. Yeah, you can mention a couple.
XTC Skylarking. It's pretty high up there.
Great record.
Probably a Brian Eno record. Um, I mean, that's a tough one. There's so many good Brian Eno records, but the Apollo Brian Eno record he did with his brother and Daniel and Law is pretty amazing. Timeless for me. Um, Todd Rundgren, that the big record.
Something Anything.
Yep.
Yeah, that was a great record for me. A big record for me when I was a kid.
The Vangel soundtrack for Blade Runner, I think, is
Oh,
pretty up there for me.
okay.
Um,
What
yeah.
do you listen? What are you listening to now? What's on your playlist right now?
And I wish I could, you know, the one thing about technology that I love is the sort of radio that I can make. It blows my mind all the
Yeah.
time that I can, again, I don't want to quote Patterson. I'll probably misquote him, but you know, he'd say something like, "Hey, you might not like the music that I make, but my record collection kicks yours ass," you know, like and
Yeah.
it, you know, it was something like that with more of a sweet, like loving, yeah, kind of arms around you, like insult.
Yeah.
But like yeah, I mean, that's again, like I like to play, when I play records in their entirety. I like to, you know, I have a vinyl player, so I like the idea of like playing the side one then side two.
Yeah.
When I'm listening, most of the time when I'm listening, I really put everything on shuffle and I'll organize all sorts of the different streaming platforms. And so, you know, it is pretty varied. I'll listen to all sorts of new releases. And I mean, some streaming, you know, services have really good algorithms, and I don't like their politics necessarily, but they know, you know, and they all are, you know, they all underpay everything. But the technology behind it is pretty amazing. And again, like so many records that I probably like that band, this band, the Miracle Legion. Remember that band in the
Yep.
80s? I
Yep.
really didn't like. I guess I didn't know a lot of people who had those records. And so now when I was like, kind of like, oh, I really liked Let's Active. I really liked. And so all of a sudden I started hearing a lot of Miracle Legion, and I was like, man, this band
Yeah.
was really, really good.
Really good. Yeah.
Really cool. And I sort of, so stuff like that, all these like cool happy accidents that have that you get turned on to, that again, like not everyone had these records. And so yeah, I mean, it goes from everything from a new release by, Phoebe Bridgers to Skip James to, Pink Floyd. I mean, I listen to a lot of ambient music. I listen to a lot of old blues. Yeah, I mean,
Cool.
you could probably, I mean, I listen, a healthy amount of jazz, and I would hope that when somebody, if somebody hangs out, every once in a while, I'll get some friends and I'll be like, hey, I'll like just start. It'll be, night. I've had a couple glasses of wine. I mean, I'm like, all right, this is what I'm hearing right now in my house, and that is kind of fun because it's like it's a whole mix.
Right on, man. Right on. What pisses you off?
Man, a lot these days, unfortunately. A lot of shit pisses me off. And it sucks because it takes my time away. A short-sightedness, people don't have an open mind.
Yeah.
The idea of conversing in like real sentences, that people, doing your own research. Pisses me off. Like, I mean, not listening to your elders or vice versa. Just oversimplifying problems pisses me off. Like, like, well, like every societal problem is so, layered, and it's not just, well, this is the problem. Well, no, it's not. It's like, it's a lot of different things. So you have to, I guess leaving out complexity. Not knowing history is a problem, I feel like, and not just, and going out and exploring, and kind of enjoying. I think people get complacent and they stay in their house. They have all these gadgets, and I don't blame them in some ways. I mean, like, whatever, it's how we are, but those aren't what's going to keep you feeding the campfire stories. It's like I don't know. Yeah. People have to go out and do stuff, and including me. So.
Amen. What are you most proud of?
I'm proud that I did what I want. I at least tried to do what I wanted to do, and I'm proud of a lot of those associations, and I'm just yeah, I'm proud that I get to talk about that fondly, and I'm not, and that's, I feel like that's hard to achieve sometimes.
Yeah, no doubt.
It might not everything to, I might not built an empire, but at least I have those cherished memories of doing it the way we want to do it.
Yeah, there was a hospice nurse who wrote a piece about the top regrets of the dying, and as you can imagine, the things that aren't on there are, I wish I would have worked harder, I wish I would have made more money, etc. And one of the things that is very high on that list is, I wish I would have had the courage to live the life that I knew I should have lived. And that's what it sounds like you're saying, that you we all make compromises, but that you pretty much have lived the life you wanted to live, and that's something to absolutely be proud of, man. Who would you most like to share a stage with? Who you have
I
not?
think I heard this question with Will.
Yeah.
I would like to share the stage with my bandmates again.
Someone you have not shared a stage with.
Oh, of course, Neil. I mean, that would be
Okay.
fun. I sometimes think about, like, just crazy lineups. But yeah, like, it would be kind of amazing to play in a band with Daniel Lanois.
Yeah.
I guess share the stage or share the bill. I guess that's a different thing.
Sure.
I don't know. It'd be kind of fun to connect with some of the Wilco guys again. I didn't even think about that. Not that I ever connected with them, but I don't know. The possibilities. I get excited when I just get to play with Alejandro again. So
yeah, I'm a huge fan of his. I was down in Austin recently, and I went to Mike Nikolai's record store. Have you been over there to Love Wheel Records over in North Austin?
No, I need to.
Yeah, it's a good record store. And as I was walking in, Alejandro was walking out, which is, that's kind of
really?
typical Austin thing. Okay, man. Well, last question.
Okay.
When you are dead and gone, what do you hope people say about you?
I hope it. Dang. I hope that I was sincere about what I liked and what I tried to do, and that I mostly did it out of all the good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What else could we want? I guess I hope people would have nice things to say, but yeah, I just hope that they would think that I was sincere in my approach, and that I liked, what I grabbed to work on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, as I've said to other people I've had on this series, I think they will be saying that about you because probably people are already saying that about you. You definitely come off as a sincere, authentic guy, and I really appreciate that. I love watching you perform. You already know Centromatic is one of my all-time favorite bands, and I've mentioned that I love the Static Diary record, and I hope you'll make more music. And I hope to see you down the road sometime soon, man. Thank you very much for taking the time to connect today.
Oh man, thanks for asking me to do it. And yeah, it's been a nice chat.
Yeah, right on, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
See you later.
See you.